Chilly here with Sirius Dallas Moon. This is Mars Hour Moon Day. Moon is 18 degrees Libra, Ascendant 27 degrees Sagittarius. We are on the minute with Jupiter opposing Pluto. So this is the deep Barbault Basket that everybody's been talking about and saying, oh, it's not what they think it is. I probably said that too. It's ushering us to the golden ages and Aquarian ages. Maybe I probably said that too. So on and on. I was at the supermarket. I did not get coffee presidente because I don't live in Denmark or Finland. But um, and there was no cheddar cheese. There was pecorino. I think pecorino is no less good than cheddar, but was a bit more expensive. And I said to the cashier, "Listen, they might be having universal basic income soon. For me, it means I might be able to get the pecorino as well." I tried the soy fla vanilla and chocolate. It's nice. It tastes like soy. Um, Now, what does the actual Barbault basket give? Now, of course, the moon is 18 degrees, which is a bit toxic, but but it will move from here a few hours, and it will move from here. Jupiter will also move from the on the minute. So, moon 18 degrees can mean a tire issue to do with toxic relations. Now, one of the things that I'm reminded of is that um, even in, let's say, kibbutz or moshav, where people shared income, people still found quarrels with one another. So, like I said, universal basic income might not resolve everything. But this is also important to understand that Neptune in Aries, which to me rules universal basic income, is also ruling hospitals and in closed places. And that means that those will have to look like Norwegian jails or hospitals. Why? Because if, let's say, in the kibbutz or moshav, a neighbor would not like a neighbor of an afif, they would say this person is what? Cuckoo. Then, if the hospital is like, in Hebrew, say Bet Avraham, where people have yoga classes, go to the gym, are not prescribed weird stuff that only cause more inflammation, because then they will begin to hit the psychiatrist and you won't be able to blame them scientifically, because if you prescribe inflammation to an overwhelmed person, you overdose their threshold and the nerve system. Or if they would put chips in them, then it would be like MK Ultra, when they electrocuted people, then the people begin to bang on the head of the psychiatrist or psychologist, and like a pen, like the ladies, the Spanish ladies, they told when the husband would be acting up, they would take a pen and boom, boom, boom. Also the Ukrainian, I was told. I don't know about the Russians, but but this is where um, eventually there's not going to be too much place in hospitals. So what happens? Neighbor becomes what? Vengeance. Now, if they are already on prescribed medication, to jail will be more difficult, because to commit crime, people need an incentive. When people have food and have housing, but this is also, the jail will have to be like the outside, like in Norwegian, Because if the outside is less than the jail, like in Tilburg, in Netherlands, I don't know, I was not in prison. People tried to convince me to go to prison. They said, you have to kill someone. I was in a shelter and I moved in between houses and I tried to see what the opportunities in Netherlands. It was before the Ukrainian war. And I said, I'm a Roman therapist. There's no doctors. I mean, there are, it's public medicine, but until they see the doctor. So I actually have something to of value, but people can only work after they have all the papers. 3 days before meeting with municipality, no papers. um, this was unfortunately also when I was tortured, so there was a lot of mind control hacking where I tried to assert my sovereignty within it. Now, there people wanted to go to prison. I did not find prison to be a place I want to go, but not because something bad about prison, but because, I'd rather not commit crime. But in prison is beautiful, and out prison is also beautiful. It's a little bit more like Norwegian, even better than Norwegian. Um, so whatever will be housing situation for people, it would have to be compatible with people with nervous system that is healthy. For example, house with land, good for agoraphobic people, good for claustrophobic people. And then people can grow their wild herbs and they'll have better food than some of the most Michelin star restaurants. It's always nice to have Michelin star restaurants. It's artistic value of food, but never been to a 5-star Michelin stars restaurant myself. I don't even think I have the clothing, the attire, the manicure, or the facial to do that. Just people think it's the Michelin star. No, the preparation is like a wedding. Only there you don't just see the family, you see actual people that go to these places and dressing codes and um, and you have to come not hungry because because the portions are small. But cultural experience for sure. There are even 5-star Michelin star restaurants that donate their food. I know small portions, but they donate their food after they're done with serving people, which I find very beautiful and a great charity. When astrology, we talk about charity. Christopher Warner coined the term astrological charity, or astrological charity is remediation. And for business, to donate food is a charity of the second house, which is income. And so they'll have more clients. Maybe I will open a Michelin star restaurant. There's both for the trillionaires and then for the people, the food later. I don't know how to cook. I would need chefs. But I know some of the portion will have porcelain. So people will eat like kings. Um, now, also for people to have their own individual houses can be a great thing where they have their own house in their own land. Why is it so good? Because they have space between one another. If somebody pisses somebody off, they can go like the lady from The Good Place, where she would close herself in the apron, or what was it? Or they would go not around this house, around another house. So less problems. Um, and more things that can be. Now, here is the question. Because Uranus is in Gemini, it's kind of like, well, if we have described something that is not utopia, but not too far, what will people have a civil war about? At first, there can be attempts to define who is entitled to this universal basic income. It's universal. Who will be living in which neighborhoods? Eventually, if everybody has their own house, then I believe that can be settled. Um, labor rights, again, everybody's unemployed because they are robots. But unemployed doesn't mean that people will not have their own garden. It just means that the disabled person is not able to clean the house, will not have to rely on somebody that could abuse them for the house because they want to send money to their family in Eckveld. Um, yeah, and that person will already have their own house, so it's not but on the account of people. And for students that, and then you say, what would we need? Students? Well, I do believe that alongside with AI, there's going to be a blooming of ancient traditional arts that are going to be leisure. For example, when you are cuckoo, then you go to hospital and they say, oh, there's creative class. Sometimes painting, sometimes cooking, sometimes gardening. But then it's not just with painting. You say, okay, there were these big painters, that big painters, and um, this is where people will begin to create art, and they'll have chance to create art out of peace and love as well. I'm not saying only, and also create for the sake of creation. They wouldn't be dependent, they wouldn't be afraid of being the starving artist. I remember when I was in between houses, particularly in the area of course, Netherlands, but also the Sharon in Israel. Sometimes on the bus, I would find the people, and they would show me their paintings. Each person more talented than the other. So they could be galleries. They're not made for people, that if they don't sell a painting, oh my God, what happens? But they would be able to have galleries where people enjoy and develop a new type of art, and this is the art that is um, from the very good place, exploring artistic styles from the basis of not being deprived. And here's fantastic because it's not about people acquiescing to the regime or the patronage or Um, and it's also doesn't necessarily need to be the art that is rebelling against this and that, and then we find out that the entire rebellion was funded by a gas company or oil company. And again, I'm not saying that the changes didn't need to be made, but it's not like we got an avant-garde rebellious art. Those people, nobody heard of them. Um, so we all, and together with technology, because people will have enough to live, they will not be so worried about. Um, they will be more concerned with developing the art or developing the skill, but from a joyous place, which I believe is going to lead to renaissance, but not just renaissance of elevated few, but renaissance of the people, which I find a great possibility and great opportunity. People will be able to study ancient languages. I remember I was traveling, again taking the bus, and there was a lady there that her father told her, study one language that almost nobody speaks. It's good for the mind. Now, because people will not work as much, there will be need to develop the mind, to not forget the mind. Just like people did, the crosswords. When I studied aromatherapy, I didn't know if I would be able to work, but I looked at the exams and the things I had to memorize, and I said, this is good against Alzheimer. And that's how I convinced myself to enjoy memorizing. With learning new languages, or particularly, when I think about it, people usually learn the languages that are going to get them a job. The languages that they can't afford to learn. The languages they won't be abandoned or homeless in the street speaking. Now, this will allow people to learn language for the sake of it. When I studied yes, my father tongue, not my biological father tongue, Dutch, which is also half my mother tongue, with 14 years, they do make a difference. Then I did not think I could find residence in Netherlands, nor a job. I just said, well, it's a part of my heritage, and I invested in school. I know usually in Netherlands there are free schools, but this one was not free, and it was lovely experience just for the sake of it to study a language. And I think we're going to have more and more of those arising. Uh, my condolences to my Greek teacher that gave her utmost best not Proto-Germanic language, what can I say? But this will revive faculties of thought that we didn't think about. Now, I want to give shout out to Shaina Tova. First of all, it is so amazing to see Shaina Tova again on my feed, Inuit content creator. And in her recent posts, she had a bit of a crisis, and then in the recent posts, she shows herself. Usually, she will talk about the traditional food and so on, and then she's showing herself say, driving Volvo. But why Volvo? Because the um, they made a patent of the safety belt, and they actually did not, they invented the safety belt, but they did not patent it so that other people will be able to improve safety in their cars. And she says Volvo was also Norwegian brand. I don't know if it is today Norwegian, was it bought, was it originally? And then she went on to show us how to prepare matcha, which she made recipe that is superseding. If she sells that to a coffee place, then she becomes billionaire. then and then eating a sandwich on the way to work. And one will say, oh, but she made Inuit food content. But here is the beauty. People not only will not forget their traditional food, because they will look for something different, but they will also be able to celebrate other traditions from a respectful place to all traditions. Now, of course, the transition in the beginning culturally can be a little bit unnerving to people, but we also think to ourselves that what a wonderful thing is for Inuit people to enjoy their traditional food, but also have actual food that is from other countries, not actual food in comparison to Inuit food, why actual food? Because previously in supermarkets, in um, amongst Inuit communities, it was nearly impossible to buy anything. However, with the changing world, the accessibility of, let's say, matcha, or a sandwich on the way to work, or a Volvo. Just Volvo brand is about safety car. Okay, their marketing is about it's a safe family car. I think it's kind of like the South. And for me to see a person that coming from community that up until now struggle to buy food at the supermarket or source the original food, being able to enjoy both is wonderful to see. And you cannot even say, oh, this was to some people, other people left in this and that. Um, no, those who follow China Donva's YouTube know that she dealt with some stuff, and um, and so on. So um, mm, 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 more things that I can say. With this Barbault basket, um, more things that I can say. So we talked about language revival, cultural revival, um, the sciences, because in the past one could need a grant to develop anything. For example, Chaos theory had a difficulty to permeate the academic structure because no professor wanted to write Chaos theory on the name. Exact sciences, Chaos is, and I believe that there are great mathematicians lingering in the world. Uh, Even astrology, I think, will be developed not just by the technology, but people will be able to computate a chart, to take a class in um, developing a new branch of mathematics. And they wouldn't need a grant from university, from this and that oligarch to do so. They would simply be able to work there however much time take a walk in the garden, and then wake up from a dream, poof, and then begin to say, okay, what is this? Play with the numbers, play with the mathematical expressions, and begin to develop their hobbies. For example, thanks to this leisure culture that we had since the previous industrial revolution, I was able to develop my astrology. Because not only we had access to Hellenistic astrology, evolutionary astrology, just by watching YouTube. And then, as you can see, my broadcasts are all free. It's not, I don't have paid programs or anything of that sort. Now, from that, being able to be exposed in such short time to so many astrologies and sift and sort and see what works, then I was able to apply things, in my case, in very unfavorable circumstances. I wish I prescribed no one to study astrology to apply astrology the way I had to apply astrology, but I was able to come up with new ideas. Aries was considered the planet of the disincluded. I said, no, it's also the planet of the elite, the superhuman project. The Aries returned to Dutch East India. More things. There were particular. I remember when it was outer planets to inner planets challenges and synastries and composites. I said we need to be part of change that is happening in the world. If this is true or not true, I don't know. It's something I said half a decade ago. So people, our own predictions also change and transform. And there were many other scientific things. I could do study life with me. I could do thought experiments. And all of that people can listen to free of charge. They don't have to cook a baby alive to have another degree and then hear me talking about, I don't know, reviving the ovals, the structure of stone-made houses that also concentrate water from the air. In the past, they had to cook babies alive, and then they could get that teaching, which was supposed to be in favor of humanity and so on, because they had to have agreements with this and agreements with that. But also, people that used to need to do crime, and usually these people, crime, hidden crime is Neptune. But Neptune is also art, is also music, is also shamanism and the medicine, channeling and poetry. And these people will be able to do these things without doing crime. There are a lot of people that people know as, oh, this is a mob boss, or in case he was successful in his work, or this was a criminal, this was a drug trafficker, this was a this, and they could be great painters, they could be great poets, they could be many other things, but they had to do these things. Universal, but now thinking ahead, universal basic income can alleviate the square that we're going to have between Neptune and Pluto. Just think about mafia and politicians in argument. Okay, in this century we did not know that. Because we had Gladio. Ma? The Kamama. And also, people could not trust one another on anything. When there is the basis, let's just say a person might not know themselves deeply erotically, and then they could either cheat, or they could or also when people had to live together, then sometimes they could be appreciating of the good things about another, and they would be having things that either of the two not able to tolerate about another, but sometimes it would be so restrictive that people felt like the personality is restricted. And when there's each person has home, woman, man, this orientation, that orientation, then people can live. They don't have to coincide. They can sometimes meet and sometimes not, or be around people where they can shine and bloom and not feel like the personality is subdued or restricted to. So um, now, naturally, the transportation will evolve. People will be able to travel more. One of the ideas that I had was across the region of Israel, Palestine, and the area. This is such a beautiful region. If we could have trains like in Switzerland that are slow, with open windows, good meal, doesn't have to be luxury, because it's for everybody to participate. And then even people that have, let's say, trauma, they can sit with open window, or people that have, I pitched this to Ministry of Transportation, or people that, let's say, have certain disabilities, or even the men spread. Why, instead of complaining about men sitting healthily, maintaining the root chakra, their sacral chakra, their fertility, which, by the way, women should also do the women's spread. It's a lesser known thing. I learned this when I was once in hospital, and there was a lady that was teaching us never to sit with the legs tight. Always, because the fertility, the second chakra, is more open, and energy can flow. So it's not obstructed, or the blood stream is not obstructed. Um, but if there is good transportation, is enough place for people to sit normally, which means legs. We saw that in kings. They sit on the throne, and the legs are spread and grounded. This is normal sitting. So women will stop complaining about the men's spread and will learn that to do women's spread themselves for their fifth vital cycle. Um, wait. Okay, Mamale. More things that can be in the future. People are worried about the pain for the water, but here is the thing. We will be able to have water from the air for every household, to make, with even using energy of solar energy, to power the houses with solar energy and make water from the air. And the people worried that the data centers would take all the land. Um, Here is the thing. They develop smaller and smaller chips that contain more. It's not only that the chips are becoming smaller, the data that they contain is becoming bigger. I think we're already able to power quantum computing. Imagine a quantum computer for every child. It means that they will be able to study the Mendeleev equations. They will be able to study what was the Mendeleev beetle, because we would be able to have advances in. Wait a second. Yes, Mendeleev beetle. Table of no. This is the Mendeleev table, but there's also the Mendeleev beetle, which is no, not this one. There was the mathematician Mendeleev. I don't remember the spelling. Dmitry Mendeleev, that's the chemist, but there's the mathematical pattern. The periodic law, predictive power, legacy. Yes, but I'm looking for fractals. I'm looking for fractal study. So we will be able to study fractals. Now, fractals are fascinating because if you think about computating the fjords, the fjords, basically the shoreline is both infinite and finite if we computate it mathematically, because the derivations are infinite, but we see that the shoreline is finite and it looks like a paradox. So I predict conversations between people to be far more interesting. People will be able to just think, to just enjoy nature, to just develop mathematics for the sake of mathematics. Um, and um, and because they can be reduced inflammation, then we will have cures for diseases we didn't think. We already see now with cancer and with neurodegenerative diseases. And I computed that abuse and violation cause inflammation. So just think reduced abuse, basically no abuse, no violation, it means no inflammation. And this is now will we have Medina cities? Because those are also kind of a question. Um, People are always afraid about the conflict. But I would be, let's just say, I would leave it open-ended question because I don't necessarily predict that that would be needed. Um, so we talked about the culture, the arts, the medicines. Now, what about architecture? And um, making statues. And I actually believe that, counter to the universal God hypothesis, we would be both closer to um, universal common denominators when it comes to human behavior. And there would be something way more leisurely about, let's say, the other gods or divinations. Um, why am I saying that? Because we understand that, let's say, with spiritual welfare, we learn that, first of all, the basis is not to abuse, not to rape, not in the name of God, not and so on and so forth. Then, not to generate abuse. Let's say, if, not to torture a person until they become abusive. Um, and that's a global common denominator. It's not about praying for this God or that God. This is basis that is before any God. Any God will have to incorporate it into its. Now, as for spiritual practices, I believe that the ones that will be closer to appreciating the abundance in nature, appreciating or seeing the divine in the mundane, not from a perspective of lack, but if you think about, let's say, again, the shoreline of the fjords, the awe at nature, the beauty of the coast. Now, we are 20 years before Pluto goes to Pisces, and when I was at the sea, there was white flag. In one of the shores, it was two shores were red flag, the other one white flag. The one that was white flag looked more dangerous than the other two, but the coastline was somehow, I think, more smooth, and the waves met with one another in very peculiar way. And I'm like, how is this white flag? I don't know. And then I began to think about um, the times where we explored the depth of the psyche, which was Pluto in Pisces. Now, of course, I was not swimming at the North Sea back then, um, but I believe we would be drawn, we would be more fascinated towards the coastline. Why? I don't know if there will be floods or not floods, or how temporary will be the floods, but the drawing to the coastline will become, how should I say that? The meeting with the vastness. And I think that, um, I don't know if it is personal or if it is for entire humanity, and this is the depths of the psyches, but being explored more from not the shallow water, but the patterns. We will be able to have the patterns in the water that allow us to observe without the, how should I say that? We wouldn't need to go into the depth of psyche that we went through, let's say, in the 1800s. Um, now, because we will be able to fly way better. I believe by 20 years we will also be able to delve into the depth of the ocean way more casually. In Norwegian, there are entire roads underwater that are like traveling in aquarium. I find it a bit claustrophobic and scary, but other people may find it fascinating. I believe that the infrastructure will probably be completed by Pluto in Pisces, and it would mean that we will be habiting the sky and habiting the ocean to way more extent. Now, the question is it because of overpopulation? No, no. Now, think about it. If most humanity is not needing to work, we also don't need to have children, and we don't have demographic, we don't need to have children to that level of extent. We have robots that do the things that humans, let's say, um, and I actually predict that people will do, um, yes, physical work because they wouldn't want to stay idle, and but more from leisurely. If I think about it, people could still had computation exercises after the invention of the calculator. In fact, Richard Feynman made it into an art. Um, Many of us, when we learned, let's say, to film, we put the camera on manual and began to fumble with the things, even though we had already Photoshop or programs that could edit the picture, um, where we actually had to have less exposure to light rather than more in order to edit the picture. Um, the people will become way more literate, but not from a Rockefeller School perspective. But why? Because it wouldn't frighten the elite. Because if we have a place to dwell and we don't have to work that hard, and think about it, I grew up as millennial. As millennials, we were exposed a lot to the motivational quotes of the elite, and it was not over nothing. Yes, J.P. Morgan wanted to us to increase the whole toothpaste the whole, but still technologies developed. Why? Because it was a market that could be allocated to the middle class. So now the trillionaires, they will not be scared of us learning how to read and write, learning how to develop mathematics. First of all, AI has computational power of quantum computing. They're more scared of AI than of people. Secondly, if we have our housing, if we have our ability to work and ability to have leisure time, and how should I say that? If we are able to travel, there is no reason for us to rebel. Do I have to have the Qatari golden plane from there? No, I don't. Do we need to build a Tower of Babel where everybody has their own? No. Some people can study this esoteric language, some that esoteric language, and they can bring a little bit from, but they don't have to build the entire corpus of human knowledge just yet. Um, there's a lot more that the elite can allocate to the people, and the elite will not be afraid to lose their how should I say that? I began to talk about it in previous episode. Their own cultural things that make them them. That, if somebody grew up old money, they can talk and they can lecture and they can teach and they can that. I did not grow up old money. I may be able to catch on some of the things. I will never be like a person that grew up in old money, and that's okay. And I would not need to compete with them on the particular piece of bread. Like for example, yesterday, I was at the beach. There were a line of hotels. Next to the beach grew jasmine flowers of the particular type that also have edible fruits. There was abundance of edible fruits. I took maybe 5 or 6. And with that I had water and I had fruit and I was at the sea. I don't worry about these people in the hotels. I was 4 hours at sea. I got cooked completely. Because if I spend time swimming at sea, eating fruit, walking home, what do I care that a billionaire lives in that and that suite and that hotel? Let them have a great time. At any case, people, let's say, of old money, they would go to the coast that have no hotels and have their own private house and own private coast. Why? To see nothing, to see nature. Pristine nature. At least I have running water and I can fill a bottle. As long as the dogma is not like, let's say, people have to pay. Right now, for example, people have to pay when they go to the coasts in Europe. Now, this is because the entire world is in Europe. They cannot physically contain people. So they put a little bit of a price tag. If person cannot afford to go to the sea, I'm sure that they can ask someone and they can have access to the sea. If they're polite and they ask nicely, I think it will probably, and if it's not too many people, it will probably be okay. The pricing model in Europe is different than, let's say, United States. Again, I don't know how it's like in the United States. Maybe it's also like that, um, but it is more normal that the people that have pay and the people that don't have pay less, or um, what? As long as people will not, let's say, bring trash and leave it there, probably will be okay. Now, best thing when it comes to culture is the live and let live. And when people have that live and let live, I think less problems. For example, I was told that the Black Sea is beautiful sea, but if woman goes alone, then men back her. So they have to go with organized travel. If such cultures, it will be more difficult. But all the millionaires go to batumi anyway. So they will have batumi, but if the culture is yes, not harassing, then things will be okay. But if culture is harassing, it means that, let's say, if women feel less comfortable to go to the beach, why do you think men would feel comfortable? What happens then? More work hours, sudden war. Ask Elvira, she used to live in the USSR. And she said the women knew if the husband drinks too much, they idealize the leader sends them off. Complaints from NATO uh, are to the Russian men, uh, don't do not drink. Maybe Russian men needs UN forces like there are in Africa to have them do things that are supportive of them, but not to over drink, and then there will not be wars. So this can be, and then they can come back and say, "What did you use in Russia?" So, oh my God, we kicked their, we used this drone and that drone and that drone and that drone, and they just kept the men stop drinking. According to Elvira. Uh, you give, I don't know, a golden plane to the leader, and yes, and so far I think it seems to work in the other nations. um, are people going to have habits that are called old money, like preserving their clothes um, and their things? I think yes. Although we have, because the industrial revolution is more about AI, but there is also an ecosystemic thought to that. If there is a robot that can fix my pants that I tend to tear up even when I buy the most, I won't say old money pants, but with fabrique modal and good quality, then um, then I can just put it to the robot and the robot fixes my pants. Because um, how should I say that? Because I would be more concerned with bathing at sea and painting, maybe I will think of designing something every now and then, but um, we may be able to have natural fabrics that the robots do the creation of, what is the clothing, and even people that live in rural places can work with the robot and they can design the fabric patterns. Now, some of them would like to give to allocate it to the robot, but some of them would like to do the original work as therapeutic work. And I think that um, both will be possible and probably both will exist. So the woman that was doing the fabric because she didn't have another option would be able to now uh, design for the robot to do the clothing and have more elaborated designs, and then do another project. And the woman that found it therapeutic, which is usually some woman that grew up in a high-tech company, Silicon Valley, and then moved to